On this day, just after dawn, the West Wind Knights in Mon City began to get busy. The houses destroyed by the Wind Demon Dragon needed them to repair, the messy streets needed them to clean up, and even the frightened travelers needed their comfort. Swan, how did you sleep yesterday? Lawrence, the goalkeeper of Mon City, rubbed his eyes while yawning, while Swan Qiang, standing on the other side of the gate, endured sleepiness. I didn't sleep well either. Ah, as long as the Wind Demon Dragon is still there, I will not dare to fall asleep at all. Hey, Swan, how about we squint for a while? As the Mon City goalkeeper duo, they have long learned the skill of standing and sleeping, and Swan, who was a little moved by Lawrence, hesitated. This is not well, if it is discovered. What do you find? The people in the city are busy, and now we are in Mond, there are no travelers who will come, just squint for a while, don't delay things. Lawrence's words were like the whispers of the devil. Swan looked at it as if there was no one, and then nodded slightly, but they didn't know that their conversation had been heard by a red ball. About 15 minutes later, the red dumpling stood on tiptoe, walked carefully out of the gate, and finally reached the bridge. Kelly, who was ordered not to leave the city by the leader of Qin, finally slipped out of the city by this opportunity. The red dumpling hopped and ran towards the Xingluo lake. Da, should I go to see Brother Lazy, or go to fish? Yeah, since this road is to Xingluo lake, then fried fish. Beside the Starfall lake, a mysterious man with a hood covering most of his face untied the stone pillar tied to his back, drank some water, poured into the grass and said with emotion, "It's still good on the ground. It feels alive again." Before the mysterious person could finish his emotions, there was a loud noise, and then a huge splash of water hit him. The good mood that had just arrived on land was instantly destroyed. Just about to open his mouth to curse the street, a fish was under the mysterious person's horrifying gaze. Stuffed it into his mouth. The anger in the mysterious man's heart is constantly surging. For so many years, he has always been punishing others. This man was rectified by others as soon as he stepped into the territory of Mond. The mysterious man picked up the pillar and planned to teach the person who ruined his mood. "Big brother, are you okay? Did the bouncing bomb hurt you?" The mysterious man saw a red dumpling with a little Red Riding Hood and a little red school bag running back from the other side of the lake. The mysterious man waved his hand, looked at Kelly's pointed ears, lifted his hood, squatted down and rubbed the head of the red dumpling. "Little guy, are you a fairy? But why can't I notice your fairy breath?" Woolen cloth. When Hong Tuanzi saw that the person in front of him was okay, he took a long breath, but the two horns on the head of the person in front of him made Kay Li interested. "Big brother, I am not a fairy, and what is a fairy?" "What?" Mysterious man was amused by Kelly's words. "My name is Ruo Feng, immortals are not things, ah, no, immortals are things, ah, no, forget it, let's not talk about immortals. Little guy, are you not afraid of me?" "Big brother, did your horns grow because you didn't eat well?" Kay Li stared, looking at Ruo Feng with a real look. Sister Qin said that if Kay Li doesn't eat well, it will become monster. Ruo Feng touched the corner of his head, feeling a little depressed. He suddenly became conscious in the underground decades ago. Although he was trapped in an egg without any sound, he still used a strange force to penetrate the egg. Observe the outside world. Those decades were his happiest time. He looked at lizards rolling around on the land through layers of rocks, and some little monsters wearing strange masks with various weapons in their hands were making food. Some chubby bouncing around, and some people who beat the rocks on his head every day. Although the pictures are limited, they are also full of fun. Until that day, he ushered in his own bad news. A group of covered-faced guys did not know where they attracted a one-eyed monster. The monster launched a strange thing and exploded the rock that protected him. Then he was picked up, and after changing hands several times, he came to a boat, which made him very uncomfortable, but within a few days, he came to land again and was bought by a pink fox. Although he came to the land, he was still uncomfortable. The land here was full of thunder attributes, which made him feel like countless bugs crawling on him, so he decided to get out of the egg. Brother Ruo Feng, what's wrong with you? Why don't you suddenly stop talking? Kelly stood on tiptoe to learn Ruo Feng's appearance, and touched the corner of Ruo Feng's head. Brother Ruo Feng, don't be afraid, Kelly will take you to find Brother Abiduo, he must have a way, and the wind protects you, Brother Ruo Feng, you will be fine. Ruo Feng was cute by Kelly. When he heard her saying that Feng Shen would protect him, he wanted to take the pillar in his hand and smashed the statue of the seven heavens in the center of the lake. At that time, he was still very young and could not go out. Every day he could only listen to the pink-haired fox telling him stories, listening to the pink-haired fox telling the outside world, reading www. He is longing for yuyuganshu.com. When he was a child, the outside world was beautiful. He could go to play with children, learn from the heroes in the story to save the beauty and become a hero, but the barriers inside the house made him impossible to break. I don't know if it's because his yearning for freedom was noticed by the wind god, or if the wind is idle, a god's eye appeared in the room, but the height is a little different, the wind attribute god's eye is floating there. In midair, he couldn't reach it. Every time he lifts himself up with the control stone, the eye of the will also move up, just like this. He was played by the idol Feng Shen for a whole year, and he was like a fish for the whole year. Played by this Feng Shen. Perhaps it was because the Feng Shen had played enough behind him, or perhaps he sensed Ruo Feng's anger. The eye of the wind floated down, and when Ruo Feng was about to take the eye of the god, a rock eye fell from the sky, not only shattered the enchantment, and also smashed the eye of the wind attribute god. Yes, it was smashed. What Ruo Feng didn't know was that in the distant Liu, an unknown rock took a long breath, ignoring what he said in his ear. He almost missed his hand. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. Otherwise, the rock turned his eyes to Meng to do something right, Barbados. At that time, he was young and ignorant. He saw that the eye of the god of wind was smashed, and was somewhat relieved. He grabbed the eye of the god of rock at his waist, pushed open the door, and walked out with an invincible appearance. Until the black-bellied pink-haired fox saw the eye of the of rock on his waist, he told him that each person can only have one eye of the god, and the attributes will not change. Now Ruo Feng is dumbfounded, and he will control the stone. Then, the eye of the rock attribute is just a decoration. Kelly said in embarrassment when she heard Ruo Feng's words, but, Ruo Feng brother, Qin sister and Barbara sister all said that as long as they are pious, Feng Shen will surely protect everyone. Ruo Feng sighed, why does this Mond believe in Feng Shen so much? He has been in Dao's wife for so many years, and he doesn't necessarily have any faith in the old woman in Ying. Looking at the fish on the ground that were still jumping, Ruo Feng's stomach made a gurgling sound, and Kei Li heard the voice, Brother Ruo Feng, are you hungry? Kei Li invites you to eat grilled fish. Hearing the word grilled fish, Ruo Feng's face changed, and he said with a wry smile, Little Kelly, is there anything to eat around here besides fish? Big brother is really not interested in fish. Kelly tilted her head and thought about it carefully, but Kelly can't cook other foods. Ruo Feng patted his chest, pointed at himself, as if handing it to him, Little Kelly, as long as you tell me where there is food nearby, then just wait here obediently. Kelly heard Ruo Feng say this, and pointed to the side of the Kuaju lake with her adoring eyes. Brother Ruo Feng, there are Kyokia people there, Kyokia people raise many pigs, and there are many fruits in their camp. Okay, leave it to me. Ruo Feng straightened Kelly's little hat, Little Kelly tidy up this place, and when I come back, we will have dinner. But, Kei Li wants to go with Brother Ruo Feng. With the hand that Kei Li is holding, she keeps acting like take Kei Li, take Kei Li. Ruo Feng can't stand Kelly's acting like a baby, so he has to make 3 chapters with Kelly. For a while, if the Kyokia people are going to use weapons to bully us, Kelly, please hide yourself and I will clean them up. Seeing Kaylee nodded obediently, Ruo Feng agreed to take her with her. Following the direction Kelly pointed, Ruo Feng took Kelly all the way forward, and found a Kaihokia people camp in an open area. In the pigsty of the Kaihokia people camp, there were 8 wild boars. Brother Ruo Feng, why are these Kaihokia people cooking some fire slimes? Kelly looked at the fire slimes bouncing in the Kaihokia people's pot, feeling very strange. Maybe it's a racial hobby? Little Kelly, you hide in this bush obediently, and you can come out after I clean them up. Ruo Feng swaggered out of the bush. The Kaihokia people in the camp were taken aback, and they picked up their weapons, and screamed at Ruo Feng. The Kaihokia thugs in the front were even ready to charge. Ruo Feng took the stone pillar out from behind, as if holding a one-handed sword, he rushed towards the Kaihokia people. Since you want to fight so, then you just try my new trick. A pillar without thinking. In an instant, a yellow sword energy swept across the Kaihokia people's camp, and the sword energy swept across the Kaihokia people, and a layer of stone appeared on the Kaihokia people, and this layer of stone quickly spread to the whole body of the Kaihokia people. Looking at the huge Kaihokia thug and the shield that was about to reach his nose, Ruo Feng patted the Kaihokia thug's body. When we are gone, this petrification will be unraveled. Then, regardless of whether the Kaihokia thugs could understand or not, he waved to the bushes hiding Kelly, and Kelly jumped out of the bushes. Wow, Brother Ruo Feng, you are too good, but why did Cory seem to have seen Brother Ruo Feng's weapon? Oh, you said this. Ruo Feng waved the pillar in his hand, and then stuck the pillar to the ground. Is it more familiar now? Yes, Kelly always feels like I've seen it before. Kelly nodded, looking like she couldn't even think of it. Ruo Feng laughed, took out a little blue guy from her arms, and took that little guy. Put it on the pillar. Hey! Is this the pillar where the little fairy lives? Kelly looked at the little fairy who wriggled on the pillar. I don't know why, but she always felt that the pillar seemed a little small. The little fairy above was still half of his body. Outside. This little guy, that happened a long time ago. Ruo Feng took the little fairy out of the pillar and stuffed it back into his pocket. When I was playing outside and found this little guy. This little guy has been pestering me. I invited him to play where I live, but this little guy has been wandering around this pillar. I thought this might be this little guy's home, and he didn't want to leave his home. Then I pulled up this little guy's house, that is, this pillar, and carried it to my home because the little guy was too greedy. After eating, I named him Dumplings. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com seems to be dissatisfied with Ruo Feng's evaluation of himself. The dumpling banged his head against Ruo Feng's arm, and Ruo Feng petted the dumpling. It's done, I'm not talking about you. Wow, Brother Ruo Feng is so amazing. Kay Li once bombed the pillar with Bang Bang for a long time, but didn't explode. She even asked Qin's sister to talk about it, and she was kept in confinement for 3 days. Then little Kelly, play with the dumplings first, and I'll cook for you. After speaking, Ruo Feng took out many weird things from the space provided by God's eye. There are white girls in the shrine. Some of the Feiying hydrangea, some of the Ming grass and blood he collected, and some general crabs he caught by fishing on the beach. In the past, when Ruo Feng peeped at the fun facts of my best friend written by the pink-haired fox, it was written about the dishes made by the old woman Ying. It is said that the old woman Ying gave her dishes to her 3 good friends. Her good friend is full of praise? I remember it seems to be 3 ghost worms, 10 singular grass, 2 hydrangea sakura, and chop the meat. Then add water and cook it together. Ruo Feng added ingredients to Kyokyu's pot according to the steps in his memory. It was a little troublesome to chop up beast meat. Neither he nor Kelly knew how to use a knife. He had to throw the whole piece of beast meat into the pot, covered the pot, and talked to Kelly about Dao's wife. The best thing about Dao's wife was that Dao's wife was surrounded by the sea. You can deep fry the fish. Your words reminded me of a friend who also likes explosions, but the fireworks she likes are not the bouncing bombs of your little troublemaker. Ruo Feng squeezed Kelly's face. If you two meet, maybe you will have a good chat. I remember her wishes to blow up the castle tower. Or is she setting off fireworks in the castle tower? During the waiting period, Ruo Feng told Kelly many interesting facts about Dao's wife. Kelly was very interested in the thunder seeds that could be discharged. Ruo Feng also generously gave Kelly a few. After Kelly happily took it, she take out a bounce and planned to add it. Kelly, don't put it next to the fire, it will. When Ruo Feng saw that the restless little hand was planning to make a bouncing bomb on the spot, he didn't have time to stop it. Thunder seeds had already happened to the unknown stuff in the bouncing bomb. Overload response. Ruo Feng shielded Kelly behind him, and the elemental shield immediately unfolded, shielding him and Kelly inside. The huge explosion and the spreading thunder light made Ruo Feng's scalp numb. It's over, set the mountain on fire, Kelly is done. Kelly knelt down, holding her head, looking at Ruo Feng pitifully. Okay, Kelly, I won't tell anyone, but you don't want to do this in the future. Something dangerous. By the way, Xiao Kelly, is there a second explosion for your bomb? Ruo Feng swallowed. If he hadn't reacted quickly just now, I'm afraid both of them would be lying on the ground. Kelly's bounce is safe. It won't explode a second time. Don't worry, brother Ruo Feng. As soon as she finished speaking, a thunder light burst into the sky, and Kelly's bouncing bomb directly turned into a thunderball. I don't know where it flew, hee hee. Kelly scratched her head. Brother Ruo Feng, you still have is that thunder seed. Ruo Feng coughed dryly. Thunder seed, let's talk about it later, let's eat first. The dishes he cooked in the pot beside should be almost ready, but I don't know if it was his illusion. He always felt that the dishes in the pot had absorbed a lot of thunder elements in the explosion just now. Since it is Ying's cooking, it should be normal to absorb some thunder elements. Ruo Feng touched his chin. Although he was a little confused and dissatisfied with Ying, he still felt that Ying, the old woman, it can be trusted. Well, it should be. Kelly heard that I was ready to eat, rubbed her belly cutely, and jumped to the side of the pot. Take a good look at Kelly, this is said to be a dish researched by Raytheon. You have a good taste. Kaylee nodded quickly, looking at the pot expectantly. Below is the moment to witness the miracle. Ruo Feng carried the lid of the pot and slowly moved away under the look of Kaylee's expectation. Dang dang dang, this is the recipe that Raytheon has studied. Ruo Feng threw the lid of the pot and pinched his waist with both hands, ready to welcome Kelly's cheers. The lid of the pot fluttered in the air a few times, and it happened to be caught by the mob Kaiokyu. On the head. Kelly looked at the dishes in the pot, the expression on her face changed from expectation to shock, then to fear, and finally looked at Ruo Feng with a pitiful look. Ruo Feng didn't hear Kaylee's exclamation, and she was still a little confused, opened her eyes, and what caught her eyes was Kaylee's pitiful face with tears in it. Brother Ruo Feng, I didn't expect your food to be so bad. No wonder you don't eat well and have horns on your head. Kelly took Ruo Feng's hand and pulled out. Brother Feng, don't eat this meal. Ruo Feng was a little puzzled when he heard this, why he didn't eat well, and when he looked down, he understood why Kaylee said that. There were some insect debris floating in the purple soup in the pot. Minko and Swikoi didn't know what magical reaction had happened. Pieces of strange jelly-like slime gel wrapped the general crab in them. Fei Sakura hydrangea floats in the purple soup, and from time to time a few purple skull-shaped bubbles emerge. Although the general crab that has absorbed the thunder element is wrapped in a strange gelatinous body, it still twitches from time to time. Looks extra strange the animal meat soaked in the purple soup, although only soaked in it for more than 10 minutes, but the flashing lightning and unknown purple patterns on the meat made people shudder. Ruo Feng swallowed his saliva, feeling the violent thunder element in the pot. Well, Kelly, this is the characteristic of Dao wife, not a strange thing, I will taste it first. That, brother Ruo Feng, don't eat it. Kelly pulled Ruo Feng's clothes corner. Kelly feels that this dish is more terrifying than the big devil in the story. Little Kelly, you can't judge dishes based on their appearance. Maybe this dish doesn't look good, but it tastes delicious. Ruo Feng talked about Kelly, and hypnotized herself. Maybe this dish is delicious. The pink-haired fox said that the old lady in Ying seems to like to eat, so she can take out dishes to entertain her friends. Maybe it's also very good. Good to eat. It is also possible that those gods are worn too badly, and the aesthetics have changed, but the taste should be good, it must be so. Ruo Feng looked at the food in the pot and finally made up his mind to taste it. He was still very curious about what God eats. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. He used the rock element to condense a pair of chopsticks, tremblingly pick up a piece of meat, and put it in his mouth. At the moment the sliced meat entered his mouth, the violent thunder element permeated all parts of the body from the meat, and the strange taste was even worse than the crystallized bone marrow he had eaten back then. Before he could savor it, he only felt black in front of him. Vaguely, he seemed to see the unimaginable knife slashing towards him. The entire sky was spinning. After a few turns, he fell heavily to the ground. Fainted. Brother Ruo Feng, Brother Ruo Feng. Kelly's voice still surrounds her ears, but he can no longer answer. And the unknown Feng Shen, who was peeping in the distance, when he saw Ruo Feng stuffing his dishes into his mouth, he had already branded him a warrior in his heart. It seems that if the seven gods meet again in the future, we must not let Thor touch the kitchen, otherwise we might stand in and lie down. A certain Feng Shen, who dared not be serious, arranged his clothes and let the dandelions in his hands flutter with the wind. Since the person who should be here is coming soon, then I have to prepare too. Dandelion drifted in the wind and landed on Kelly and Ruo Feng. Kelly, who had been dragging Ruo Feng with difficulty, suddenly felt a force appear out of thin air, making her exhaustion dissipated. I saw Kelly strenuously, lifting Ruo Feng to the top of her head, and ran towards Mon City. She wanted to go back quickly and let Sister Barbara treat Brother Ruo Feng. But, if Brother Feng doesn't eat well, shouldn't Brother Abedo take a look first? Kelly ran while thinking about who should treat Ruo Feng first. Kelly! You are running around again. A familiar voice rang in Kelly's ears, and Kelly squatted down and held her head habitually, but Ruo Feng, who was holding her, fell heavily to the ground. Warm sunlight shines through the window, shining in the confinement room. A little blue fairy is communicating with the pigeon next to the window, and successfully obtains a flower from the pigeon. The little fairy put the flower next to the head of the person lying on the ground, and then performed a ritual that he didn't know where he learned from, as if he wanted the person on the ground to go all the way. Dumpling, are you trying to send me away? Ruo Feng struggled to sit up from the ground, grabbed the dumpling that was still flying in the air, and severely ravaged it a few times. Exhaled with the dumplings, Ruo Feng only observed the surroundings. An empty room, except for a bed, only had one bathroom. Although the decoration was pretty good, he could still see it. He cannot go out at will. It's really bad luck, I just came to Mond, do you want to eat my first meal in prison? Ruo Feng condensed a rock element crystal and handed it to the dumpling. You little guy, as long as I'm there, you don't have to worry about food and clothing, why no one will give me food? Ruo Feng knocked on the door vigorously, hey, is there anyone? Get something to eat for the little master. Yeah, it seems our guest is awake. A frivolous male voice sounded outside the door, I'll just say, Rosalia, it must be the guest's voice, you still don't believe it. Shut up, this kind of suspicious person must be interrogated. A cold and impatient interruption of that person's words. Hurry up and open the door. Click, the door was opened, and a man with a black blindfold and a woman with burgundy hair came to him. Ruo Feng felt the cold breath on the two of them, and the eyes of the ice elemental couldn't run away. It felt exactly the same to him as the eldest lady from the god's family. "This Liu fairy, are you awake?" The one-eyed man who gave Ruofeng the feeling of an old fox smiled and asked, "I wonder why you come to Mond. When inquiring about the purpose of others, first state your name. Isn't this common sense?" "Oh, that was my rudeness. In Xiakaya, Captain Mond Cavalry, this beautiful nun is Rosalia. It's nice to meet you." The more Ruofeng looks at Kaya in front of him, the more he feels facing the pink-haired fox. This is not like a good person. "My name is Ruofeng, Liu, but I used to live in Dao's wife. It's no wonder that your excellency is dressed so much like Dao wife." He used to live in Dao wife. Kaya had such an expression. Rosalia looked at the two hypocritical people in front of her and left a sentence of slowly talk. Left Captain Kaya, "I don't know why, I want to stay here, this doesn't seem to be a good place." Ruofeng puts Kaya's shoulders, looks familiar, and wants to go out. Kaya stopped him and said with a weird look, "Your Excellency Ruofeng, do you really know what happened?" "What happened?" Ruofeng was full of question marks. "I just came to Mond, and I didn't even enter the city of Mond, what else can I do?" Kaya saw Ruofeng not pretending, and asked him as if he was sure of one thing, "Your Excellency Ruofeng came to Mond, didn't you come to seek revenge?" "Vengeance?" Ruofeng touched his chin, and said with some uncertainty, "Do I have any enemies in Mond?" "Your Excellency Ruofeng, do you have no enemies?" "Do you think I have an enemy?" "I think you have enemies." "Who is my enemy?" Ruofeng looked dazed. He had never been to Mond before. Where is the enemy, and even if there is an enemy, how did Kaya know? Seeing that the expression on Ruofeng's face was not pretentious, Kaya told Ruofeng the whole story. On this day, Bennett received a commission from the Adventurers Association to clean up the Kaihokiu people near the Fruit Wine Lake. Originally, this commission was very simple based on Bennett's strength. On the way to Cider Lake, Bennett saw the shooting star, a purple shooting star. He immediately closed his eyes and made a wish to the shooting star, but when he realized that the shooting star was not purple, it was already too late. According to Bennett's description, the meteor was full of thunder elements, and there were some flames in it, triggering an overload response from time to time. If it weren't for other adventure groups passing by, maybe Bennett would have been electrocuted and unable to take care of himself. "You can't blame me for this, I'll fire a cannon, who knows that the kid was hit?" Ruofeng quibly said, "And isn't it all right?" Your Excellency Ruofeng thought this was over. There was a trace of pity in Kaya's eyes. This is just the beginning. Was taken back to the city of Mond, and Bennett, who received Barbara's treatment, set off in the direction of Fruit Wine Lake after a short rest. There was no difficulty on the road this time. When he came to the camp of the Kaihokiu, Bennett found that a thug, Kaihokiu, seemed to have eaten his stomach and was rolling on the ground holding his stomach. Bennett's eyes lit up. This was the kind of good luck he had never had before. The highest combat power of the Kaihokiu people in this camp had eaten up their stomachs, so this good opportunity should not be wasted. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. Bennett immediately rushed to the mob Kaihokiu. The flame on the one-handed sword just touched the mob Kaihokiu's skin, and an overload reaction was directly triggered. The huge impact directly overturned Bennett to the ground. Under Bennett's stunned expression, the mob Kaihokiu completed his transformation, and the purple pattern covered the whole body of the mob Kaihokiu. "I don't know where it came from." Thunder and lightning flashed on his big axe and his shield. Bennett swallowed. He had never seen this kind of Chu-Chu, like King Lekai Chu-Chu, but not the huge size of King Lekai Chu-Chu. The violent thunder element reminds Bennett that this is not an enemy he can solve, and then Bennett is beaten by King Lekai Kiakayu. "Well, that little Bennett brother is okay." Ruofeng smiled awkwardly. He didn't expect that the power of his cooking would be so powerful that Kaihokiu people were mutated. Nothing happened then. Mr. Abedo who passed by saved Bennett. Kaya looked at Ruo Feng with a smile. Do you know how our chief alchemist, Mr. Abedo, commented on you? How do you rate it? He said, although I don't know who made the potion, it is simply a master of a generation if we can use such simple equipment and such sparse and ordinary materials to make this potion. The master communicates well. Your Excellency, Ruo Feng's method is hard to believe that you and Bennett have no deep hatred. Kaya circled Ruo Feng, seemingly looking for his flaws. Okay, Kaya, I have already investigated this matter clearly. That potion, no, that pot of dishes is actually the lunch prepared by Mr. Ruo Feng. A woman walked towards him. From her sorrow, we can see that this woman is either in a high position or a member of a certain big family, and she dares to talk to the cavalry captain like this. The power in Mond should be very strong. Big. Thinking of this, Ruo Feng thought, isn't this just a free canteen and hotel? If you are looking for a job with her, and you say that there is no place to live and nothing to eat, isn't this all meals and accommodation included? Head Qin, why are you here too? Kaya looked at Ruo Feng, it seems that this fairy still has a lot of face. Okay Kaya, I'll take care of this. Qin rubbed his eyebrows, and now Mond is tired of facing the wind demon dragon. If at this time, what happens to this Liyue fairy in Mond, I am afraid that Mond is even more precarious, which is why she rushed over immediately after hearing the news. Hello this fairy, I am Qin, the acting head of the Knights of the West Wind. I am very glad that you are a guest at Mond. Qin's etiquette is very standard, at least much better than the Kaya next to Ruo Feng. It's okay, it's okay. Ruo Feng was also embarrassed by the official Qin's. After all, he had just indirectly cheated someone on the site. Now the boss of the family is still so polite, Ruo Feng is really embarrassed. Well, you haven't eaten yet, how about I cook some food and we eat and talk? Ruo Feng felt his empty stomach and made a suggestion that he thought was very good. Kaya and Qin glanced at each other. Both of them hesitated. Ruo Feng, who didn't notice the abnormality, continued to explain Thor's recipe, and said with interest, I'll make you another Thor. That's the dish that Thor personally made. No, Mr. Ruo Feng, if there is a need, I think my friend Abedo will like the dishes you cook very much. Kaya heard the dishes Thor had cooked, and then imagined that Kelly added her own rules of survival. The sentence on the above Thunder God's dishes, it will be spoiled after eating, immediately struck the thoughts of the undead and poor Dao, and recommended to Ruo Feng the diners he thought Abedo, and at the same time silently prayed for Abedo in my heart, may Feng Shen flicker you. A huge dragon roar interrupted Ruo Feng, who was still thinking about what to serve the two of them. When he heard the dragon roar, Qin's face changed, the wind demon dragon is here again. Kaya, you take Mr. Ruo Feng to find a safe place to take refuge, I will go and take a look outside. After speaking, Qin rushed out of the door, and Kaya's face did not smile. Your Excellency Ruo Feng, come with me bar. Kaya, the wind demon dragon mentioned by the leader of Qin, is the murderer of your Mond's disturbance. Ruo Feng is an immortal, although he hasn't learned anything, but the basic perception ability still exists. He has suffered any injuries in the past, and he has been healed after lying on the ground for a whole day. This time he came to Mond only because of food poisoning, and he has been lying down for so long, which is obviously abnormal. Moreover, although he has been floating on the sea for a long time, he has been on land for so long, and he has recovered from anything, but the weakness in his body is still reminding him to pay attention to rest. Your Excellency Ruo Feng is right. Since the wind demon dragon came, the people in Mon City have been panicking, and the leader of Qin is even more worried. Kyle looked around and found that no one lowered his voice and said, it is said that the leader of Qin has come since the wind demon. Strike, the hair is falling out in a handful, do you have any formulas for hair growth or something? I don't have a hair growth formula, but I know how to solve the problem of Qin's hair loss. Oh? How to solve it? Kaya speculated, are you going to shave the head of Qin's hair while she is resting? Ruo Feng looked at Kaya with a shocked look on his face. Good fellow, the evil in your heart has been exposed. I will tell you, Kaya, if this is not without a meal, tomorrow the whole monde will know your evil thoughts. Kaya coughed awkwardly, then I don't know what Ruo Feng's solution is. It's not easy to say, just solve the root cause of the problem directly. Ruo Feng carried the stone pillars and walked out of the gate of the West Wind Knights. As soon as he left the house, the huge tornado almost sucked him in, but there seemed to be someone in the sky entangled with the wind demon dragon, and Chief Qin was evacuating the crowd. If I drive away the wind demon dragon, it should be considered a great achievement. Then I will mention that I have no place to live, and no food to eat, so I can get a white female ticket. I am really a genius. Thinking of this, Ruo Feng stood the stone pillar on the ground and took out the dumpling from his arms. Dumpling, I will be responsible for conveying the rock elements to you for a while, and you will be responsible for controlling the direction. We will find a way to bring this sarcophagus to it. A bit. The dumpling didn't nod in the air, and flew to the groove of the stone pillar and twisted his ass, and forced himself into it. You should lose weight with the dumpling. Your pillars can't fit you anymore. Feeling the angry little eyes of the dumpling, Ruo Feng decisively chose to shut his mouth. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com will have to rely on dumplings for food and drink in the future. Ruo Feng folded his hands together, closed his eyes and focused, looking for the rock element from the chaotic veins of the earth. For a moment, the golden light symbolizing the rock element covered Ruo Feng's body. The rock element began to flee towards the stone pillar on Ruo Feng, and the rich rock element began to gather on the stone pillar. The dumpling on the stone pillar also learned the appearance of Ruo Feng, with two short hands together. And Ying in the sky is struggling to avoid the attack of the wind demon dragon. Although she has an increase given to her by a mysterious person, she still can't help the wind demon dragon for a while. Suddenly, a golden light flashed on the ground. Although Ying was full of doubts, she continued to attack the wind demon dragon in the air, and the wind bullet slammed on the wind demon dragon, but was there any substantial damage? Ang. The wind demon dragon screamed suddenly, flapped its wings, and fell down for a while before continuing to flap its wings. The wind demon dragon fiercely released a hurricane to the ground before flying into the distance, but the resentment in his eyes became more obvious. Ruo Feng on the ground looked at the dumpling controlling the rock element and the beam of rock element rising up into the wind fiercely into the chrysanthemum of the wind demon dragon, swallowing. Dumpling, how did you learn this trick? Directly stab the rock element in there. What about the simple dumpling I used to be? Let's not talk about it, let's run quickly. Ruo Feng looked at the huge hurricane coming towards him from the sky, then looked at the boy in the green hat who was still stunned in place, and said in his heart, the Monde people are like this now. Are you brave? Don't run away after all this is the case. Ruo Feng had to hold the green hat boy in his arms, feeling the violent wind element behind him, and could only pray silently in his heart, pink-haired fox, don't cheat me, if you cheat me, I won't be a ghost. Let you go. Just when the wind element was about to touch Ruo Feng, the spell in his arms exploded with a strong thunder element. The thunder element attached to Ruo Feng and reacted with the wind from the wind demon dragon's angry blow. Thunder spread, and Amber, who was worried that the traveler was attacked by a sudden thunder element, fainted before poor Amber could speak. The leader of Qin did not notice the spreading thunder element while organizing the evacuation of the masses. When the thunder element filled her body, it was too late to prepare for defense. Qin Tuanz's yellow hair was directly erected by electricity, as if she had broken away from the gravity, and directly exploded her hair. Lisa, who was observing from a distance, saw Qin's embarrassed appearance, and smiled with her mouth in her mouth. The lion-tooth rider has become a real lion. And Ruo Feng was also uncomfortable. After all, the thunder element spread out from the spell in his arms. He became a conductor of the thunder element. If he hadn't had the foresight, he had made some preparations when he was a child, and he might have been electrocuted. "Hey, can you put me down?" A neutral voice sounded in Ruo Feng's arms, and then Ruo Feng looked down at the person he was saving. A Cecilia flower is tied next to the green hat, and his black hair gradually turns from black to turquoise. The green pupils are looking at him with a smile. The stockings on his legs feel good to the touch? Ruo Feng shook his head, shook off the strange thought, and put the person in his arms down, apologizing, "Sorry girl, I am sorry, just now in an emergency, I picked you up." "It's okay." The girl in front of him winked mischievously, "My name is Wendy, I'm a boy, are you a man?" Ruo Feng looked at Wendy up and down. He was even more thundered when he was holding General Raiden's knife and wanted to sneak into his life seat when he was a professional martial artist. Ruo Feng tremblingly pointed at Wendy, repeatedly confirming in an uncertain tone. After Wendy's affirmative answer, Ruo Feng rushed to the wishing pool in the Mun center, repeatedly rubbing his hands. While washing his hands, he accidentally took some mora with him, and then accidentally stuffed these mora into his god's eyes. Unexpectedly, I didn't expect that the first time I touched the stockings, I actually touched it on a man. Ruo Feng repeatedly rubbed his hands and took the opportunity to fish out some mora. "Ahem, Lord Wakamine, if you need mora, I think the Knights of the West Wind will be happy to pay you some." Qin watched Ruo Feng, who was skillfully manipulating the rock element and using the rock to create a rock chair, suddenly had an idea in his heart. "You don't have to be polite, the leader of Qin, I'm also doing something right. The leader of Qin doesn't need to set up a house for me, and I don't have to give me a card for free food. I am a person, I don't have any desires." Qin looked at Ruo Feng, who had said everything he wanted, and made it clear to himself, "Your Excellency Ruo Feng, if you need a place to live, the Westwind Knights can prepare for you, the cost of your meal in Mond, the Knights can also pay for you, but I hope you can help Mond and contribute to Mond. Contribute your strength." At this time, Ruo Feng hadn't noticed his miserable life in the future, so he agreed. Then Qin gave him a house, which was half destroyed by the wind demon dragon. Ruo Feng also showed Qin his mastery. "House building technology. I used to build houses when I spent the night in the wild with my cheating friend Wan Yi. It's not me who played with you. As long as I look at the house, I know how to build it." "Head Qin, do you know Daejima's castle tower?" Qin nodded. After all, it was the place where Daejia's Thor lives, and she still heard about it. "A few years ago, have you heard that Dao's wife suddenly appeared a second Tianchu?" Ruo Feng said mysteriously. "At that time, there was a lot of trouble in Dao's wife." "I heard about it. It is said that many rice wives at that time said that Thor wanted to change places, so the second castle tower was built. That is my masterpiece of the night." Ruo Feng proudly pinched his waist and raised his head. "At that time, my good friend Xiaogong always had a wish to set off fireworks in the castle tower. On her birthday, in order to realize her wish, I spent some time and built a castle tower directly. Although the castle tower was demolished after the birthday of Xiaogong, it is also a masterpiece of Xiao." As Ruo Feng said, he went around the house. Ruo Feng touched his chin and put his hand on the wall. The rock element spread along his hand to the house. The broken part of the house began to be repaired. Even the roof tiles were built by Ruo Feng. Yu reading www.yuyukanshu.com. If it wasn't for the long time I had been floating on the sea, coupled with the disorder of your ground veins, which prevented me from fully recovering, I would definitely build a castle tower in Mond for you to see. Ruo Feng held on to the wall for a while, dizzy, panting heavily. Qin hurriedly stepped forward to help. Wendy moved a step faster than Qin, supporting Ruo Feng. "Head of Qin, you should go to work. He saved my life and I will take care of him." Qin saw that he was a bard, and then thought about the files that need to be handled by himself. "Then leave it to you. If you have any questions, just go to the Knights to find me." "Hey, leave it to me. Wendy helped Ruo Feng, who was in a coma, into the room. Ruo Feng, who was in a coma, only felt as if he had fallen on a piece of grass. The fragrance of the wind mixed with grass and flowers made him particularly relaxed. I slept right into the night when Ruo Feng woke up dazedly, and saw Wendy lying next to the bed. Ruo Feng sighed, and put the quilt on Wendy's body. Maybe he was awakened by Ruo Feng's actions. Wendy rubbed his sleepy eyes and stretched his waist. Although the front of his chest could see Pink Chuan, under the faint light of the candle, a strange beauty made Ruo Feng blush and twist his face. Ended up. Morix is on, the evil Mond people used this trick to make me bear the wear and tear that I shouldn't bear at this age. When I return to Liu, I must bless me to find a beautiful girlfriend, otherwise it is true. It's crooked. If I really find it, I will definitely buy you the most expensive incense every year, and I will give you incense every year, and the rock is on top, so I must bless me. Hey, what are you talking about? Wendy brought her face closer, and the two faces were close together under the candle's fire. Ruo Feng swallowed while smelling the fragrance of the flowers on Wendy's body. Angel's Gift, Ruo Feng and Wendy were sitting in front of the bar. Wendy expertly ordered 2 glasses of cider. Master Deluc, here is very good cider. Deluc in the bar brought out 2 glasses of cider. It's surprising that someone invited you to drink. Deluc handed the wine to Ruo Feng. Mr. Ruo Feng, thank you for your help to Mon today. I will ask you for the wine today. The feeling is good. Ruo Feng heard that he could save money, so he took out a recipe and gave it to Deluc. This is the special wine recipe from Dao wife. It's useless for me to give it to you. Deluc was not polite, and put out a lot of wine in front of Ruo Feng and spit out 3 words: drink whatever. Wendy heard the casual drink, his eyes were bright, and he picked up a bottle of wine he couldn't usually afford. Pour myself a glass. After a careful taste, Wendy let out a sigh of emotion. Sure enough, there is a reason for expensive wine. Have you ever drank Wendy? Before coming to Mond, Ruo Feng had some concepts about Mora, but in Dao's wife, every time he went out shopping, he would meet the eldest lady of the gods, and he usually didn't. He needs to pay. I'm just an ordinary bard, I can only play with some cider. Wendy poured himself another glass of wine, closed his eyes and tasted it carefully. Ruo Feng touched his chin, and he also wanted to find a way to get some Mora to eat. He looked at Wendy's white face, and a bold thought came out in his heart. Wendy, how are your skills as a bard? Wendy heard Ruo Feng ask him. I am the best bard in the world, there is no doubt about that. Then it will be easy. Ruo Feng patted the table with an evil smile on his face. Wendy, do you want to drink good wine every day? Wendy looked at the evil smile on Ruo Feng's face and shook his head in a hurry. I always have a bad premonition, I still drink apple bar. Hey, don't rush to refuse. Ruo Feng continued to draw Wendy cakes. Think about it, don't you want to drink expensive wine every day and eat peerless delicacies? There are still many people who praise you as the best in the world. A good bard. Wendy was a little moved by what he said. Then what are you going to do? Ruo Feng watched Wendy get the bait, put his arm around Wendy's shoulder, and whispered his plan in his ear. First, I found an empty space in Liu, and then I copied some buildings in Mond on the open space, and it became a scenic spot in the Mond area. Then you can sing praises to Emperor Yan Wang in it, so that Liu people will reward you when they are happy. Then rent out the empty shop, or we hire people to make some cheap snacks, put more peppers and more salt in the snacks, and then introduce some high-priced drinks. The people who come here are usually small couples, and they will definitely buy it for the sake of face. How about that? This is my big plan to make money. After finishing talking, Ruo Feng complained in regretful tone, when I was my wife, I wanted to make a fake castle tower, and then collect the tickets. As a result, the little girl from the Zhu Shao family, I just built it, she found someone. It was opened for me, and I obviously played together when I was young. It seems that you were quite courageous when you were in Dao wife. Wendy heard Ruo Feng's words and looked at Ruo Feng in surprise. I heard that Thor's temper has not been very good. That's more than bad, I'll tell you Wendy, Dao wife's heavenly leadership is a big pit compared with the West Wind Knights, with corruption on the top and greed on the bottom. Thinking of what happened to him, Ruo Feng slapped the table angrily. When the young master goes to Dao's wife next time, the young master will take the Xiaogong and blow up the Zhu Shao family. I will be angry when I think about it. Calm down, calm down. Wendy calmed Ruo Feng, I'm not in Dao wife now, it's useless to be angry, or I'll play a song for you. Forget it, drink a bar, I don't know if my friends are involved, but the pink fox should protect them. Borrowing wine is the easiest to get intoxicated. Only after drinking a few bottles of wine, Ruo Feng was already overwhelmed and collapsed on Wendy. Wendy put Ruo Feng's head on his lap and looked at Ruo Feng's drunk appearance. The idea came up. Wendy borrowed a pen from Master Diluc, and altered it on Ruo Feng's face. After drawing for a while, Wendy looked at his masterpiece with satisfaction, and a princess hugged Ruo Feng in his arms. Hey, I hope this little guy won't blame me tomorrow. The next day, the sun rose as usual. Ruo Feng covered his head, slowly got up from the bed, rubbed his head, I can't drink so much next time, my head hurts. Grunt, Ruo Feng's stomach protested. He hadn't eaten anything since last night, and he had a stomach of wine. Ruo Feng clutched his stomach and decided to find something to eat. After feeding the dumpling a rock element crystal, reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Ruo Feng tidied up his clothes and went out. In front of the deer hunter, Ying and Pei Men were eating. Suddenly they found that a man with messy hair and drunk was walking towards him, and the man's face was still painted with the image of the Feng Shen statue. Traveler, look at it, this person is the one who helped you defeat the Wind Demon Dragon yesterday. Pointing to Ruo Feng, Pei Men said with surprise, I saw it clearly below yesterday, it is him. Ying looked at the sloppy Ruo Feng, a little hard to accept, is it really him? It doesn't feel like a master, and why is there a statue of the seven heavens on his face? Maybe he is a believer of Feng Shen? Or maybe he worships Feng Shen too much. Pei Men is a little uncertain. Anyway, let's thank him in the way of Mond people. Pei Meng and Ying walked to Ruo Feng's side. Ruo Feng lowered his head, looking at the blonde girl in front of him, and a little fairy floating in the air that seemed to be delicious. May the wind god protect you. Ying Xiang. Ruo Feng thank you for helping me repel the wind demon dragon yesterday. Oh, it turns out that you are the girl flying in the sky. Ruo Feng looked at the girl with no elemental fluctuations in front of her, and put down the menu in his hand. My name is Ruo Feng. I don't know if I should ask or not. My name is Ying. This is my partner, Pei Meng. That I want to ask, how did you cultivate a little fairy into a human form? Ruo Feng took the dumpling out of his arms, and the dumpling floated in the air suspiciously. Pei Meng saw the dumpling, and the symbol of money in his eyes scared the dumpling into Ruo Feng's arms. Pei Meng, pay attention. Ying pulled Pei Meng, who wanted to catch the dumpling. I don't know how Pei Meng turned into a human form. I caught it while fishing in the lake. Pei Meng is so big, where do you usually stuff her? Ruo Feng looked up and down Ying, but didn't find anything like a pocket. Pei Meng has its own space and can hide. Ying Xiang. Ruo Feng explained, if there is danger in normal times, Pei Meng will hide in. Wow, isn't it that Pei Meng can hold a lot of things? Ruo Feng moved a big rock out of his god's eye space. Pei Meng, show me how you installed it. Hey! It's so big, I can't get in no matter what. Pei Meng looked at the big rock in front of him, and shook his head frantically. If you put it in, Pei Meng will break. Ying listened to Pei Men's words of tiger wolf, her face flushed slightly, and she pulled Pei Men's face. Little Pei Men, what are you talking about? Hey! Pei Men was stunned, her face turned red, and she pointed to Ruo Feng, you bad guy, I want to give you a nickname, you'll be called a big pervert. Ruo Feng spread his hands innocently, and he just asked Pei Men to demonstrate that he didn't do anything, why he became a pervert. Traveler, traveler, I have found you. A black-haired girl with red bunny ears slowly landed in front of Ying from the sky. Under Ruo Feng's perception, the girl in front of her was full of vitality. Since you still have business, then I won't bother. Ruo Feng wiped out the food on the table, wiped his mouth, and quickly left the deer hunter. Not long after he walked, he heard Palman yelling, Traveler, that big satyr has eaten all our food. Oh, I'm not full yet. Hearing Pei Men's cry, Ruo Feng quickened his pace and came to a corner. Ruo Feng touched his chin. He seemed to agree to Qin yesterday and help them repair the house. Let's move. Ruo Feng looked around and decided to start repairing the most severely damaged houses. After a whole morning of hard work, he not only helped the owner of the house repair the house, but also had some troubles with the house. People who don't like the layout very much, Ruo Feng also helped them relocate. Not only did some people leave him for lunch at noon, but even the poor knights of the West Wind were disgusted with their slow work efficiency. Ruo Feng quickly slipped away while the enthusiastic people were not paying attention. The people of Mond are too enthusiastic, too. Ruo Feng wiped the sweat from his forehead. Wakamine looked at the tavern with a big hole in front of him, and the little cat standing in front of the tavern? No, a little lowly. Hello, kid, I'm here to repair the house. Ruo Feng greeted the little Lolita at the door. As soon as she heard that she was here to repair the house, she took Ruo Feng's hand and went into the tavern. There is no one in the tavern, and even the boss is not there. Big brother, the boss is going to walk the cat again. Tell me what you need, and I will help you get it. Little guy, don't have to be so troublesome, but your grown-up is really big-hearted and threw a child like you into the tavern by yourself. Ruo Feng touched the little girl's head, the cat's ears moved especially cute. Diona is not a kid, Diona is the one who wants to destroy the entire Mond wine business. Diona pinched her waist, looking very strong. Ruo Feng was amused by the little adult Diona in front of him, then little Diona, how are you going to destroy Mond's wine business? When Diona heard Ruo Feng's question, she became energetic. He picked up the bartending tools on the table and gave Ruo Feng a glass of wine. When Ruo Feng saw that Diona worked so hard, she regarded it as a child's play. Now, he controls the rocks and mended the roof of the tavern. Dang dang dang, this is the wine I made. Brother, do you really want to drink it, but it's hard to drink. Diona handed the cup full of unknown liquid to Ruo Feng. Ruo Feng looked at the half of the lizard tail in the wine glass, his head buzzing, but in order not to dampen Diona's confidence, Ruo Feng decided to take a sip. Ruo Feng took a small sip under Diona's expectant gaze, and the wine flowed down his throat into his stomach. Ruo Feng seemed to be staying next to the Lady of the Gods in the hot summer, it was a comfortable one. The comfortable feeling ran across the body. If you insist on describing it, it would be to say bad things about General Raiden under the eyes of the Tianlings pursuing it. They still can't help it. Ruo Feng resisted the desire for a dry mouthful, and carefully packed the wine into the space of God's eye. Little Diona, this is too ugly. I have to find a place to eliminate this glass of wine. I have some here. Materials, you can see if you need it. Ruo Feng brought out a lot of Daejima local specialties. Diona was also very happy to see so many materials that she had never seen before, and believed that Ruo Feng was her helper in destroying Mond's wine industry. Diona, you use these ingredients to make a few glasses of wine, I will help you taste it. Simple Diona heard what Ruo Feng said, you read www.yuyuganshu.com was deeply moved, and then picked up the bartending tools, determined to make a cup of the most difficult wine for Ruo Feng to drink. Ruo Feng watched Diona put the red cherry hydrangea, ghost worm, and song grass into the wine. Ruo Feng shuddered looking at the familiar formula. With so many materials, Diona chose these three. I'm afraid this thing is not bad anymore. It may be that I went to see Emperor Yanwang directly after drinking. When Ruo Feng was still thinking about a reason to slip away, Diona had finished what she said was the worst wine. Brother, why are you sweating so much on your head? Diona moved her little ear, is it too hot? Diona used ice elements to cool down the wine in the glass and handed it to Ruo Feng. Ruo Feng trembling hands took the wine that Diona handed over. Under Diona's expectant eyes, Ruo Feng took a sip, and that sip gave him a taste of what a peerless wine is. The crushed hydrangea saccharum makes the taste of the wine more delicate, and the weak current of the grass, crisp, and hemp makes the wine have a different kind of stimulation in the mouth. What is even more amazing is the ghost worm. The ghost worm, which was originally disgusting, reacts cleverly with the wine after being crushed. The bitter taste makes the wine more aftertaste. Ruo Feng drank it and gave it a thumbs up. As expected, Diona, this wine is terrible. When Ruo Feng said that, Diona was also very happy. Then I will make a few more wines, and brother Ruo Feng will help me taste it. Ruo Feng heard it, and nodded again and again. Little Diona, can you make an extra glass when you mix the wine? I will take it back to my friend to taste it. I am worried that my taste may be different from that of the Monde. The innocent little Diona felt that Ruo Feng's words made sense, so she nodded and agreed. When Ruo Feng woke up the next morning, he found that the wine he brought for Wendy on the table had disappeared, but the sweet stuffed chicken prepared for him did not move. When does this guy come back? He doesn't say hello. Drinking and not eating is not good for your health. Ruo Feng tore off a chicken leg and stuffed it into his mouth. While eating, he was thinking about how to get the recipe for this dish. The taste was surprisingly good, and it was also cheap, and the ingredients were easy to find. Eating and drinking, closed the door, Ruo Feng began to look for the broken house and planned to fish and see the scenery of Monde. I remember someone said yesterday that there was a huge Feng Shen statue on Monde Square, that should be considered a feature. Ruo Feng touched his chin and looked around. At the entrance of the West Wind Knights building, after Ying received the title of honorary knight from Qin, she found the person she saw that day. Following all the way, she found someone in a corner with a bang. Sorry, I accidentally bumped into you. Ying, where are you going in such a hurry? Ruo Feng soothed the dumpling who was sleeping in his arms and was knocked out. Hey! Pervert, what are you doing here? Peimen stretched out his hand to rub the dumpling's face, but was flexibly avoided by the dumpling. Of course I want to repair the house. Taking advantage of Peimen's attention, Ruo Feng stretched out his hand to grasp Peimen, pinched Peimen's face, and said happily, Peimen's face is so soft. Joy! Peimen shook his head, broke free from Ruo Feng's grasp, covered his face with his little hand, and said angrily, Wow, pervert, what are you doing so hard, don't you know it hurts? Ruo Feng saw that Peimen's face was reddened by himself and scratched his head embarrassedly. Next time I will pay attention, don't use such force, try to make you feel no pain. That's right, if you hurt Peimen next time, Peimen will not let you touch it, hey. Peimen raised her small face in the sky, with an arrogant look. Ying looked at the two people who were talking about tiger wolf words with a speechless expression, feeling tired for a while. Peimen, if we don't leave, we will be lost. Ah, that's right. Peimen was reminded by Ying, and he suddenly realized, no wonder I always feel that I have forgotten something. Go traveler, goodbye, big satyr. Peimen waved at Ruo Feng, Ying also waved. Ruo Feng looked at them in a hurry, and didn't ask much. See you next time, you go quickly. Watching the two leave, Ruo Feng didn't have the thought of wandering. First repair a few houses, and then go to the Westerly Cathedral at noon. I heard that there is a nun in the church that seems very popular. After a busy morning, Ruo Feng declined to keep him for dinner. After the deer hunter had packed a portion of mora meat, he planned to visit the Westerly Cathedral. Wow, this church is really magnificent. Ruo Feng put his hand on the wall of the Westerly Cathedral, feeling the structure of the Westerly Cathedral with rock elements. It took a long time to move his hand away. I didn't expect ordinary people to build this kind of building. Ruo Feng felt that the structure of the Westerly Cathedral was so complicated, and then opened the door, intending to take a look at the internal structure. As soon as I opened the door, I heard Wendy telling a nun that he was Barbados. Ruo Feng couldn't help but smile when he heard it. Wendy, although I know you admire the wind god, it's not like that. When the nun heard what Ruo Feng said, she also said to Wendy, little poet, even foreigners don't believe what you say, let alone me. Next, after Ying's remarks, Ruo Feng learned the whole story. It turned out that several of them wanted to borrow Fengshen's weapon, the sky piano, but it seemed that it took a lot of procedures to borrow it. Wendy? Do you need the piano in the sky? Ruo Feng asked Wendy nonchalantly. Wendy nodded after thinking about it. Wakamine waved his hand and said proudly, then I will steal it for you tonight. Wendy. Looking at the unkind eyes of the nuns beside him, he stepped back a few steps. Actually, you don't need to be so eager. I'll steal it tonight. Don't worry, since you are useful, then I will definitely help you assemble it. Ruo Feng patted his chest. On the matter of digging tunnels, no one is my Ruo Feng's opponent. Wow, that's amazing. Pimeng's eyes glistened on the side, looking like a little money fan. Ruo Feng, are there many treasure chests underground? There are not many treasure chests. There are many machine parts, but they seem to be very valuable. Ruo Feng took out a black ball that didn't know what it was for from the eyes of the gods and handed it to Peimen. Hey! Really? Peimen turned around in the air and looked at the ball in Ruo Feng's hand excitedly. Of course, I still have a lot of these things. Ruo Feng stuffed it into Peimen's arms. I'll give it to you. You reading www.yuyuganshu.com might still sell some money. Thank you Ruo Feng. Peimen received the ball, but she obviously underestimated the weight of the ball. Under the influence of gravity, the black ball fell off directly in Peimen's hands. The black ball that hit the ground heavily, as if it was suddenly pressed to activate the light, flashed a red light, and also made a beeping sound. Ruo Feng's face changed when he heard the sound. The 360 degrees cube constructed by the rock elements had no dead angles, airtight, and light-tight rock houses that covered the black ball. There was a muffled sound. Ruo Feng looked at the rock wall where several cracks had appeared, and squeezed his sweat for himself, but Peimen still looked shocked and did not heal. The nuns on the side looked at a blasphemer who said they were Fengshen. One threatened to steal the piano of the sky, and the other was bombing in the church with a bomb, and they took up broomsticks and other tools to Ruo Feng and his group. Smashed! Ruo Feng and his group ran out of the church in embarrassment, and the nuns behind them were still shouting to let them see Ruo Feng and the others enter the church, so they would give them some color. Watching Ruo Feng and the others escape in embarrassment, the nuns seemed to understand why Rosalia likes to use violence to solve problems so much. Although it is wrong to use violence, it can really solve the problem. It was also from this day that Rosalia discovered that the nuns not only did not reject her, but were rather interested in letting her teach them fighting skills. This abnormal scene made Rosalia thought that they had been wicked, and after Barbara's repeated checks to confirm that there was nothing wrong, Rosalia reluctantly taught the nuns some fighting skills. Later, the crowd of fools began to circulate that the Knights of the West Wind in Mond is the best bully. There is a team that only acts in the dark, and it is the real demon. After the group of people were driven out of the Westerly Cathedral, Wendy and Ying didn't know what they were talking about sneakily. Ruo Feng leaned to his side and overheard. They were discovered by the two, and fled in Wendy's smiling eyes. Ruo Feng, who had nothing to do in his spare time, had to continue his home repair trip. During this period, he also met the lively Amber. Amber gave him a wing of wind and arranged an exam. In the evening, Ruo Feng returned to his own house covered in dust, taking a bath while vomiting. What's wrong with me? Why do I use the wings of the wind to fly with my dignified fairy? When I am almost recovered, I will return to Liu. I will use my best state to challenge Liu's immortals, and then get my own name. Ruo Feng, who took a bath, wondered what name I should take, and did not notice the breeze that suddenly appeared inside the house. Ruo Feng collapsed on the bed after taking a shower. He rubbed his eyes vigorously but still couldn't resist the eyelids that attracted each other, and fell into a deep sleep. Hey, in order to prevent you from realizing my identity, I will be wronged in the next few days. Wendy stood on the head of the bed with a trace of blue wind in his hands, slowly blending into Ruo Feng's body. In the dream, Ruo Feng only felt his body relaxed for a while, and made a blushing sound involuntarily. Wendy blushed and stared at Ruo Feng on the bed. Really, it's cheaper for you, so much supernatural power, enough to restore more than half of you. Counting the time, the traveler should be coming soon and have a good dream for my friend. Wendy put the quilt on Ruo Feng, closed the window, and gently closed the door when he left. In the middle of the night, Ruo Feng, who was still in his dream, suddenly felt that the world was shaking. Before he could react, Kai's familiar face appeared in front of him. Your Excellency Ruo Feng, although you don't know why you stole the Qin of the sky, you still sleep here after stealing it. Wouldn't you look down on our Westwind Knights too much? Ruo Feng was stunned by what Kaya said. What did you say? I stole the piano of the sky. Hey, this joke can't be made like that. Although I originally wanted to steal the sky piano tonight, I have been sleeping. Oh? Really? Kaya moved the bed aside, and a huge hole appeared in front of Ruo Feng. Your Excellency Ruo Feng, then what is going on with this hole that leads directly to the Westerly Cathedral? Ruo Feng looked at the hole under the bed and was dumbfounded. WC, when did the hole appear? No, I really don't know. Ruo Feng was framed by two members of the Westwind Knights, but due to Ruo Feng's identity, Kaya had to send Ruo Feng to the confinement room. In the confinement room, Ruo Feng returned to this familiar place again. Hey, brother Ruo Feng, have you come with me? Ruo Feng turned her head and found that Kelly was lying on the ground, holding paper and pen in her hand, not knowing what she was writing and painting. Is little Kelly locked in again? Ruo Feng straightened Kelly's hat and took out a large handful of his homemade melon seeds from the eyes of the gods. This melon seeds were dried with violet seeds. Before seeing anything interesting, he went over to take the melon seeds, watched and ate them, and he would share some of them with his friends. As time passed, the whole Daikai became popular. Little Kelly, this melon seed knocks lightly with your small front teeth, and you can eat the contents. Seeing Kelly peeling the shell clumsily with her fingers, Ruo Feng also pointed to Kelly. After Kaylee successfully ate the first whole sunflower seeds, Kaylee showed a satisfied smile on her face. And Ruo Feng on the side was thinking about what happened tonight. First of all, he can rule out Kaya's own-eyed malicious trick on himself. And the hole at the bottom of the bed, even if sleepwalking, it is impossible to dig such a hole, and it goes straight to the Westerly Cathedral. And Ruo Feng can guarantee that it does not exist before he goes to sleep. At that time, his ground vein perception did not find the hole. To put it bluntly, his ground vein perception is even better than his eyes. Wait, ground vein perception? Ruo Feng's mind flashed. He found something wrong. When he fell asleep, his ground vein perception turned off unexpectedly. You must know that his ground vein perception has been developed into a state of being turned on all the time after being attacked by the pink fox countless times, but just now, when he fell asleep, it turned off. By the way, the dumpling may know something. Ruo Feng took the dumpling out of his arms and found that the dumpling was also asleep, and sleeping soundly. Walking along the way, there was no trace of being awakened. Dumpling, wake up, Dumpling! How did Ruo Feng call Dumpling? but the dumpling didn't mean to be awake. Ruo Feng's brows were furrowed, and even the dumpling was asleep. A fool could see that he was overcast. Kelly looked at the frowning Ruo Feng and the dumpling who didn't wake up. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com also started her mind. When she saw the bouncing bomb in her bag, a good idea appeared in her mind. Since she was fried fish in Xingluahu, Sister Qin could hear it in Mond, then she detonates a bouncing bomb now, and the dumpling will definitely be awakened. Or, Brother Ruo Feng, let the bouncing bomb explode and wake up the dumpling with your voice. At this time, Kelly felt that she was a little genius. No need. Ruo Feng hurriedly stopped Kaylee's thoughts. He had been overshadowed and committed a crime. If this were to add an instigation to Kaylee to blow up the West Wind Knights, then he might really be unable to get out. The more Ruo Feng thinks about it, the more he feels that he must have been pitted by others. He has always been pitted by others, and he will be pitted by others one day. He really played a whole life with eagles, and finally was pecked by a few sparrows. Knowing that the black-bellied pink-haired fox knew it, he could laugh at him for a long time. Angry Ruo Feng was habitually preparing to vent his breath from the earth, but just as he injected the rock element into the earth, he discovered that his strength had recovered by more than half. Although he was not as good as his peak state, it was still enough for him to wave. Does more sleep really help to restore strength? Ruo Feng suppressed this question first, he just wanted to know that he was pitted. Kelly, do you know any restless places in the city lately? Ruo Feng stuffed the dumplings into his arms and asked about Kelly with regret. Kelly tilted her head, thinking for a long time before saying, I remember that Sister Qin had a quarrel with a person called somebody a few days ago. Sister Qin at that time was terrible. Fools! Ruo Feng crushed the melon seeds in his hand and looked fiercely at the window of the confinement room. It looks like Dao wife, the lesson for you is still not enough.